Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a village boy becomes Kenya's president. Former Vice President William Ruto takes the office for the top job before chairing crowds. He's leaned into his humble beginnings. There's a peaceful transfer of authority as he takes over from his former boss. Also, Ethiopia's embattled northern region of Tigray is reportedly hit by drone strikes. Rebel leaders accused the federal government of targeting the local capital of Mekele just days after they'd said that they were open to peace talks. And Ivory Coast is trying to beef up its fish industry. The country has one of the world's biggest national appetites for fish, but despite its fish-filled coastline, lakes and lagoon, it's the world's largest importer of tilapia from Asia. The government's trying to boost the market for homegrown fare. We take a closer look. But first, Kenya has its fifth president. Former number 2, William Ruto, was sworn in as the country's leader on Tuesday. He took office a week after the Supreme Court rejected a challenge to his electoral win from his rival. Raila Odinga had accused Ruto of cheating, and though Odinga did accept the judge's ruling, he didn't attend Tuesday's inauguration. There were jubilant crowds celebrating with Ruto, though. Calling himself a village boy, he'd run a campaign focusing on his humble origins. His predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta, had backed longtime opposition figure Odinga in last month's election, and both are from prominent Kenyan political families. Vivian Wandera has more.
President William Ruto's supporters were at the Moi International Sports Stadium, Kasarani, as early as 5 a.m. in the morning, even before the stadium doors officially opened. The stadium, which can hold up to 60,000 people, was full to capacity by 8 a.m. in the morning before the events of the day officially started. Ruto, who was sworn in as Kenya's fifth president a few minutes past 12:30 p.m., was met with tremendous cheers from the crowds of his supporters who were waiting for him, and his swearing-in ceremony was also attended by 18 heads of states from within the continent and all the heads of states from the East African community and over 30 diplomats. Listen to some of his supporters.
It was important for me to come and see Ruto in person because I have a lot of hope in him. I can also tell people in my village that I witnessed Ruto swearing in Nairobi.
I voted for Ruto and I was waiting for him to be declared winner. When I saw he had been challenged in court, it broke my heart. So I wanted to witness the swearing in myself.
Kenya's former President Uhuru Kenyatta was cheered by the crowds for handing over power peacefully and diligently, despite the bad blood between him and the new president. Now, Ruto, in his first address to Kenyans as the fifth president, said that his government will work tirelessly and diligently to ensure that he sets the pace for the next government come 2027 and also ensure that he fulfills the promises that he made to Kenyans. These sentiments come after Kenyans are keen to see what will happen and what he will do in his first 100 days in office, and especially how he will deal with the cost of living that has been so high.
Vivian Wandera there for us in Nairobi. Now, Ruto quickly promised to push for 100% clean energy in the country by 2030 and to make environmental issues a political priority in Kenya.
Among the central concerns of my government will be climate change. In our country, women and men, young people, farmers, workers, and local communities suffer the consequences of climate emergency. It is not too late to respond. To tackle this threat, we must act urgently to keep global heating levels below the 1.5 Celsius, help those in need, and end addiction to fossil fuels.
Well, the surge in food prices in Kenya has been exacerbating the country's economic crisis. Climate change has led to devastating drought in parts of the country and jeopardized crucial crops. In a push to achieve food self-sufficiency, the government had started giving farmers drought-resistant seed and building more dams. Our correspondents tell us more.
Kirinyaga County produces 80% of Kenya's rice. In 2021, the lack of rain had a devastating impact. Crops yielded 40% less grain.
These last 3 years, we have not had good rain. Our yields have been very low due to the lack of water. Rice is very dependent on water.
Kenya is currently experiencing its worst drought in 40 years. To counter the effects of this increasingly frequent weather phenomena, the government has introduced a new variety of rice developed for the country's climate.
Komboka does not need a lot of water. Here, there has been no water for the past few weeks, and it has grown anyway.
However, only 20% of farmers in the irrigation scheme use this variety. Most of them continue to plant those that are more dependent on water. To help, the government built a dam that's been in use since mid-August. But this is not enough to increase production, so organizations are encouraging farmers to adapt the new seeds.
So technologies like this that are able to yield more with the same amount of water, same amount of land, certainly begin to help us close the gap of our food imports, as well as the demand for rice that we have.
By 2030, Kenya plans to produce enough rice to meet its consumption. Doubling the yield of new varieties should make it possible to cope with climate change and help feed the population. This year alone, 3.5 million people in the country suffered from lack of food due to drought.
More children will face famine in Somalia than at any other time this century so far. The UN's Children's Agency warned that this year more than 500,000 Somali under fives are likely to face potentially fatal severe acute malnutrition. UNICEF's emphasised that the deaths are preventable. The projections for the consequences of the prolonged drought in the Horn of Africa is more serious than in 2011, when more than 250,000 Somalis died because of famine. Nutrition centres across the country are already at maximum capacity, and aid chiefs are calling on the international community to do more. And Tigrayan rebel authorities accused the Ethiopian army of having carried out drone strikes on the capital of the northern region on Tuesday. The central government has yet to respond to reports that Mekele was bombed just days after Tigrayan leaders had said that they were ready for another ceasefire with the federal government. Caroline Lombardi has more.
Drone strikes on Tuesday morning targeted a university and a TV station in Mekele. Rebels in Ethiopia's region of Tigray blamed the central government. The television station, which was reportedly knocked off air, published these photos on Facebook. It said the strikes had caused heavy human and material damage. An official at the main hospital in Tigray said the number of casualties was still uncertain.
Today, an early morning drone attack in Mekele. One injured patient has arrived at Aider. Total casualties not yet known.
The region of Tigray is governed by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. It's been battling the federal army since late 2020. In November that year, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops to topple the TPLF in what he said was a response to attacks on federal army camps. The attack on Tuesday comes days after rebel authorities indicated they were ready for a new ceasefire, as this TPLF spokesman highlighted in a tweet.
This is happening after the government of Tigray established a negotiating team and expressed its readiness for peace talks.
The UN and the African Union welcomed the rebels' overture, referring to the TPLF as the Tigray Regional Government. Ethiopia's central government classifies the TPLF as a terrorist organization. A ceasefire had already been brokered in March, but fighting resumed in the region in late August, with the two sides trading accusations about who is responsible.
And finally, Ivory Coast has one of the world's biggest national appetites for fish, but despite the huge demand in the country's healthy natural resources in the sector, Ivorian fisheries are very underdeveloped. The country is the leading importer of tilapia from China, but the pandemic and the war in Ukraine has made overseas sourcing less reliable, and now Ivory Coast is trying to make its fish industries more self-sufficient. Take a look.
Tuna, tilapia, or even carp. These are some of the kinds of fish that can be found in the Ajame market. The majority is imported, mainly from China. Imported fish is so popular here because it's much cheaper.
These fish, for example, you can buy them for 1,500 CFA francs, but these ones aren't frozen and you can't buy them for that. Here in Ivory Coast, a kilo of fish is expensive, that's why we can't sell it.
Even though local fish is more expensive, Dennis Conan, this Ivorian fish farmer who set up his farm in northern Abidjan, still manages to sell everything he produces, and he wishes he could produce more to meet the huge local demand. Instead, he has to compete with imported produce.
We think it's unfair competition, and that's why we're calling for support from the government. There are things that we can change. First, increase national production, and why not impose taxes on imported goods to support national production.
National production only covers 15% of the local demand. And to make up for this deficit, Ivorians hope to push their national production up to 700,000 tons of tilapia fish per year.
It is indeed very frustrating to see the bulk of consumption coming from outside. But Ivory Coast could become more competitive by helping fish farmers and those who do aqua farming, making quality small fish available and introducing tax exemption.
The Ivorian state hopes to be self-sufficient by 2030, but the Ivorian population is increasing and the challenges will be even greater. For now, imported tilapias will continue to fill the shelves of Ivorian markets.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
With all the main European news, debates between representatives of the best and worst performing EU member states, and exclusive interviews with major personalities.
Talking Europe, presented by Catherine Nicholson on France 24 and France24.com.